It said this, verse 22, all spoke well of him. So to a man, to a woman, actually it was just the men, to a man, everybody was like, awesome. I mean, they had heard that he was a great teacher. Now he's back home. Good boy or a local boy made good, comes home, he's hanging out in the synagogue, and now they find out that he's Messiah. They're all speaking well of him. It says there that they were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. And they had this one question, isn't this Joseph's son? Now, here's what's going on in that question. Two things. One is incredulity. I don't even know if that's a word. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe that Joseph's kid, Jesus, who had grown up in the barn next door making cabinets and fixing door frames, had gone off for some period of time and now had come back, and all of a sudden he's teaching like he's teaching without any education to do so. And he's making these claims to the office of Messiah. I mean, how could this happen? I remember when he was a snot-nosed kid. I mean, remember that one time? It's hard to picture Jesus in these roles, right? But Jesus was a snot-nosed kid. And everybody in Nazareth remembered him as such. And they just couldn't believe it. I can't believe this is Joseph's son. Look at how well he's doing. But then, because we read the next verses, we also understand in this question, is this Joseph's son? That there's some anticipation going on here. Because in Jesus saying these things, it's like your uncle coming home and saying, I won the Powerball. $180 million. Your eyes get really big at that point, don't they? Because you're like, I'm family. Trickle down economics. This is going to be a good Christmas. I mean, he's probably going to build some stuff that I can go visit. He's probably going to have some cars that I can borrow every once in a while, right? I mean, picture this. In the Jewish faith, there would be very few things better than having the Messiah, the predicted one, who would come as the Redeemer of a nation. And remember, they were thinking governmentally here. They were thinking like taking over the known world. That's what their Messiah was going to do. I mean, there would be few things better that they could think of than to have someone from their own place become that person. I mean, the fringe benefits are going to flow. And all these guys were thinking, oh, we just hit the jackpot. One of our own is the Messiah. Woohoo! Party on. I got to call somebody. If they had a phone, they would have. Because everything, and this is what happened a lot of times when people started figuring out who Jesus was. Like, remember his disciples? If you keep reading in the book of Luke, you're going to see that his disciples had this huge argument one day as to who was going to sit to the right or to the left of Jesus. And Jesus had to keep reminding these guys, it's not what this is, fellas. This isn't, my big crowning moment. I'm going to get a crown, but it's not the kind of crown you're thinking of. Yeah, these people were just, they were counting their money. They were counting all of their, all of the good things that were going to come to them as a result of Jesus being who he just said he is. Well, Jesus is going to go and ruin it. Just like all the good things that we know of, they get ruined eventually somewhere, somehow. Did I drop something? Look what he does. Jesus said to them, verse 23, surely you will quote this proverb to me. Because he's anticipating what's going on. They haven't said anything yet, but he's already like, I know what's going on here. You guys are figuring out how this is going to make your lives better. Here we go. Let me kind of dash those hopes. He says, you're going to quote this proverb to me, physician, heal yourself, which is basically a proverb means it takes care of your own house, which is what these people were thinking. Hey, Messiah, we must be the first, priority in your life because we're from your hometown. And so you're going to quote to me, hey, physician, heal us first. Take care of us. And it stands to reason. If your family, if your friends are in need, and a stranger is also in need, the typical human response is to take care of family and friends first, and then, help those outside that circle, next. That's just how we roll. So that's what they were hoping from Christ in this instance. And then he goes on, he says, you're probably going to ask me to do here in your hometown what you've heard that I did in Capernaum. Now, Capernaum, this is something we got to unpack. Capernaum is a place that, according to Luke, Jesus hasn't visited yet. Now, he may have, and it's just not recorded. But if you keep reading down, and in fact, if you come here next week, I'll talk to you about Capernaum, because that's where Jesus goes next. In verse 31, he's going to end up there, and he's going to do lots of miraculous stuff there. So I think what's happening here is he's just projecting into the future. He's doing some predictive stuff, and he's saying, hey, in the future, I'm going to go to Capernaum. In fact, if you keep reading, you're going to see that that's where Peter's from, and that's where Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, and that's where Jesus kind of sets up home base. And so his ministry kind of flows out of Capernaum. He's probably saying to them, look, you're going to get really jealous of Capernaum because you're going to wish that I'd done all the miracles and all the great stuff, and I'd set up home base here in Nazareth, but you're going to find out that that's not what I'm doing. Does everybody understand that? Doesn't matter, I have to keep going. Here we go. So he says, I tell you the truth. And Jesus always said, I tell you the truth. Or in some versions, it's verily, verily, I say unto you. He's basically saying, everybody listen up. It's like when I tell you as a preacher, everybody look at me. So have you ever heard me say that? Okay, that's when I really want you to listen. I always want you to listen. But if you happen to be sleeping, Marty, I don't know where you are. Where are you? Anyway, but if you happen to be sleeping, that's when I want you to wake up, because this one's really important. You with me? Everybody down in Riverview with me? Okay. When I say that, that's what I mean. This is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, I tell you the truth, he continued, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. Now this is true for a couple reasons. First of all, if you're from a place, then like I said earlier, they know you from way back when, and they just can't get used to you being what you are now as opposed to what you were then. Does anybody have that person in your family? They've grown up to be really successful, but you knew them when they were like failing 7th grade? And it doesn't matter how successful or what they get or how important they are to other people, you'll still know them as little Johnny or, stupid Johnny or whatever you call them. It's the same way for me. I'm by God's grace blessed to be the pastor of a church and hopefully doing okay at that and stuff. But when I go back home to my home church where I started out as a junior high intern, I'm still a junior high intern there. And people come up to me and they grab my belly and like, oh, you put on a few, huh, buddy? It's like, Sorry, that was therapeutic for me. Anyway, but it's something bigger than that. He's not just talking about familiarity here. He says prophet for a reason there. He says a prophet is not accepted in his hometown. A prophet, just so we know, is not accepted in any town. Because the prophet's job stunk. I mean, on human terms, the prophet's job was to come in and tell a bunch of proud people who thought that they were okay that they're not. He's like a consultant for those of you in the business world. He comes in and tells you everything that's wrong with your company. And you're like, you don't know us. You don't know what's going on. That's what a prophet did. He was told by God to go set up by the city gates and tell everybody that you're toast. God's going to wipe you out. There's going to be a marauding nation. Have a nice day. I mean, that's their job. No prophet is accepted. And Jesus says, you know what? I'm not any different than that. I'm the exact same kind of prophet. In fact, he's going to talk all the time about how he has to go down to Jerusalem and die and then 3 days rise up after. He's going to say that over and over again. Why? Because there's a huge portion of the listening audience that don't like what they're hearing from Jesus. And they do end up murdering him. Because he's a prophet with a message they don't want to hear. Well, he's going to give them a taste of the message that they don't want to hear. You ready? All these good Jewish folk in the synagogue are about to get really ticked. Here it comes. He says in verse 25, I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time. Now, everybody would go in their Rolodex to Elijah. They'd know that would be the book that we call 1 Kings. And this was actually in chapter 17, if you want to read about it later. They'd go to the stories of Elijah, and they'd remember the story with him. And he goes on to explain what the story was. He says, I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land.